We're live on the YouTubes. So, hello and welcome to ALIA Does, what are we here? I've forgotten what we've called this. ALIA Tech Talks. I nearly did a Debbie Does Dallas joke there.
Whoa.
ALIA Tech Talks with system techs and lighting programmers. My name is Alex Hughes. I will be presenting this little panel, which is not so much a panel, but more just a conversation. To my left or right, depending on the way that YouTubers flip this, we have Liam Ashton, who is sitting there waving at you now. We've got Duane. How do you pronounce your last name?
Inocencio.
Inocencio.
Yeah.
And we have Brendan Malone. Pronounce your name. There we go. So this is our panel. I'll let you know that we've got about 15 people watching. No questions so far, but I reckon I'll just sort of throw it open to a sort of an open conversation here. Gentlemen, it's been quite a while. How have you been keeping busy and keeping your mind active during this period? Have you been doing other jobs? What have you been doing? Who wants to start?
Anyone going to dive in?
No, it looks like it's you, Brendan.
Yeah. I'm surprised I'm the one talking first. I looked at finding other work. There's not a lot of work really out there at the moment, and what is out there, there's a lot of competition for. I seriously considered leaving the industry, retooling and going into something else. I've got the rigger's ticket, the truck license, so there was a few options there. But, I've been doing this for over 15 years, not including working in school productions, and it was really sad to sort of think of just throwing that all away because the times are hard. And I do know some people that have for various reasons. And, I didn't want to be down that road. So being the situation that it is, I decided that, it was probably a good opportunity to study, train, retool so that as things do start to come back, one, I'm in a better position to pick up work when it comes through, but, just ready to hit the ground running with more knowledge and more skills, really.
Yeah, fantastic. And Liam?
I've gone completely the opposite way and have just been filling my time with stuff that I never really get to do. So I've been reading a lot. I've been cooking a lot. I built a dining table. Just getting some stuff done around the house and enjoying being home for,
And I see you've got an MA2 in your background. Have you been doing a little bit of learning? Have you been going through any of the online training courses?
Yeah, for sure. I have been spending a bit of time brushing up on some more advanced Vectorworks stuff. And in the first couple of weeks of this, I retooled my my start show file and, did a few things like that. And I've been watching webinars as they come up. And but I've been trying not to stress, I guess, about trying to get on top of every piece of software and hardware that I possibly can. I've just been I find that kind of thing really stresses me out really quickly. So rather than get myself all worked up about all this stuff I don't know yet, I'm just just taking advantage of the time, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. And Duane?
Funny enough, I've done a bit of all of what the other two have done. So for myself, I've been upskilling as well. So I've been able to participate in a couple of webinars, in particular software that I always wanted to have a go at without it being, on site and having to learn at the same time. I've actually had the time to actually work out the nicks and crannies of certain softwares like Resolume. In particular, video, I've sort of gone down that pathway a little bit. But once the height of the coronavirus sort of kicked off, I basically was doing what a lot of people were doing, and was applying for jobs. So I ended up finding a job in finance. But at heart, production is still there. So I've been able to do a little bit of upskilling in the meantime. There was a good about 4 weeks worth, almost a month of doing nothing but basically upskilling and looking into, we're active people, and I just didn't want to sit at home, even though I was forced to, without doing something or achieving something. So going outside of the box of lighting was one of those elements in which I did with, say, vision and a little bit of audio, I'll have to say. But keeping up to date was the main thing for me.
Yeah, okay. And as a group, have you all sort of explored any software that you know, if you didn't have this time to do, you wouldn't have explored? Has anyone been looking at like Disguise or media servers more in depth?
I've started down the Disguise rabbit hole. There's obviously a lot there to get into, but started looking at it.
Yeah, Disguise, I've certainly had a little dabble in that as well, and trying to do a lot of things that are wrong in it to achieve the right things around.
Okay.
I haven't been looking into any video software at the moment, so I've been sticking to the lighting, not really being an operator anymore, just doing a bit of work on MA3, trying to pick up some skills on that.
And how are you finding MA3? This is definitely not like you can talk about whatever you want, but I'm not going to steer this towards my key topics here. But you've kind of verged towards my favorite one of my favorite ones, which is MA. But how are you finding, especially from a systems tech perspective, how are you finding MA3 in the way that it functions? Are you seeing any benefits? Do you foresee, any huge things?
Look, from a systems perspective, not really thinking about programming, I have found, particularly when you're looking at things like your network settings and your initial setup, it's a lot more streamlined. It's not so hard to find things. There's less settings to be looking at. Certainly, I remember setting up a couple with things like ArtNet, Pathport, etc., different protocols, was really straightforward, really easy, really powerful. So that was a good improvement from the 2, where going from 1 to 2 was sort of like, what in the heck is going on? Why are there 17 different things I need to look at in 6 different places? So I'm really enjoying the simplicity of being able to very quickly set things up. And particularly in the future, that'll be good, because when you need to do phone support to either your own other staff, other people in the industry, even clients sometimes, it's going to be a lot easier to walk them through things when there's not 6 or 7 screens to navigate to. So I'm enjoying it so far. I'm really only just starting to scratch the surface of it, hoping in the next few weeks to get my hands on an actual console from somebody, or go somewhere and have a bit of a play with one now that the lockdown's a little less strict.
Well, you can always come and use mine, and that's not, again, a plug. You can always come down and look. I guess I've got sort of 2 questions. Obviously, with MA3, you've got that third network card, and I'm not sure whether you're aware, you touched on it with phone support, but you'll be able to essentially network the MA3s into the internet and provide support via that way. Another thing that the MA3 has also brought in is standardized views, which is something that the Hogs have had for a lot of years. So that'll also be another good point. But do you feel like in your workflows you'll see internet connecting consoles? Because I personally have seen that as such a horrible thing. We put so much hard work into making sure that there's nothing external to what we're running. Why would you want to introduce internet into these networks? It's
There's definitely application for it. I was involved a little bit in the last Christmas, but a lot the Christmas before, in long-term Christmas displays. And there was quite a lot of internet on the backs of laptops running MA software to allow us to log in remotely to perform maintenance and checks on those systems, also running things like webcams into that. And it wasn't very stable using laptops with Wi-Fi or internet dongles, and on top of that then using IP cameras all trying to run through a laptop. It just really isn't designed to work that way. And the idea was to cut down on labour call-outs, to actually have to go on site to fix these things and speed up the ability to do these quickly, and it really didn't function very well. So the 3 having the ability to be online in that sense will actually be really useful. Probably not so much in the live production, but sort of in that longest term, maybe architectural installations, it has a lot of use, in my opinion.
Yeah, cool.
It certainly opens up another avenue as well of not just being a console for live environments. You could always almost put that in an architectural side of it as well, like Brendan was saying. So there's certainly aspects of it which I think are really, really promising in the future. It is a little bit daunting and scary, thinking that, it will be connected to the internet, and with sort of hacking and everything that goes on in the background, you keep that in mind. But, certainly I think that the way it's going now with opening up avenues is awesome on the platform.
I think I'm quite excited about it from a support standpoint. Like the amount of times I have been somewhere quite remote and, on the phone to whoever the regional distributor for MA is, or on the phone to Alex, like trying to work out how to get something to work. Yeah, I from that point of view, I think it's a really exciting thing. But like anything I do with a network, like that come showtime, like there won't be any access to the outside world in that network. So like, I think running your rehearsal or running your programming session and being able to log on and fix issues is great, and then do what you normally do and just disappear it. And I don't know. I'm not too worried about like getting hacked or anything on my show network. And even if we did have cause to be worried about it, I just think like even if we did have cause to be worried about it, like doing your basic like backup every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, like what's the worst that happens, really?
Well, I guess we'll find out what the worst that can happen is, because there'll be one idiot that ruins it for everyone, without a doubt.
And that's all it is. It takes one person. But why is that person running an internet session at the same time where he's got an event to almost 20,000 people? Like it just...
you pretty much just described every convention center in the country. Oh, it's networkable. Let's just put it on the network. And suddenly Joe Bloggs in the office, who's doing their previs, is logged on and taken over the plenary session. And I speak from experience, having had that happen several times.
I kind of also see it from Liam's perspective. I from a remote support thing, I think it'll be great to be able to log into other consoles or even work remotely. I guess during this COVID time, everyone's been kind of racing to see what can be remotely controlled. Like, can we do an MA remotely? And, the answer is yes, but sort of. But I think with MA3, if they're looking at least making sessions streamable over the internet and fixture files, retrievable, which is what fixture share is actually for, it's infinitely powerful. So I guess I see it from both perspectives. The next question, not so much MA related, but kind of MA related. Give me an idea of what you reckon when all festivals return, what front of house at festivals is going to look like. Are we going to see an MA3 sitting off to the corner for that one LED that requested it, that's then linked to an MA2? Or do you think, we are on the cusp of people starting to embrace MA3 now that they've especially had more time to use it?
So I guess it's more the case of who's willing to give it a go.
Are you willing to give it a go as a programmer?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only way. We can actually see what the opportunities are for future technology. So I'm happy to give it a go, providing that there's a backup. So I certainly want a sense of security there.
So would you program your next show that goes out on MA3?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
And I only say that because, there's this beautiful technology that's out there, and there's certainly aspects of it that have made it a lot easier. Brendan basically mentioned, the networking capabilities of it. So it's all about sort of making it easy for yourself rather than it being more difficult. But then it can go the other way as well. The ease can also be turned into a monster itself. But, one of those things is that, I'd certainly give it a go moving into the future. Now that I've had a lot more play with it, with tutorials and having that access, like Liam was mentioning about, that tech support is really important. And I think that's one of those things where if you basically with technology, as long as there's other people who are sort of in the same picture as you that you can call upon or even get any, like the forums, which are really, really good as well. Tutorials have been really, really, really good as well in that sense. I find as long as there's a support network out there, I'd be happy to give it a go.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sort of on the other end of that, in that I think I would give it a crack if it was for a small show or something that I knew didn't need a complicated final product. but otherwise, I kind of have to look at it from a perspective of like, I am providing a service. I am being paid to create whatever I'm being paid to create. I feel most comfortable doing that on the current version. So I feel most comfortable doing that on MA2. I know that I can do what I need to do on MA2, whereas I'm still waiting on things to be released in MA3. And, you know, we don't actually know what that timeline looks like yet. We don't know where, like, how far down the road we're going to be until we get, you know, the same functionality that we have in the MA2 already. So it's hard for me to sort of turn around and just go, oh yeah, I'll just next touring gig I do, I'll program it on an MA3. But yeah, I think from a point of view where you're being paid to do something, it's hard to go, oh, I'm just gonna jump on the new tech. Like, obviously it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg sort of thing. Like, you know, the tech is only going to develop so quickly if we're not using it, but it's also hard to sort of say, I want to be paid for this product that might not be as good as what I can produce on the two. So,
and what features are you finding missing, Liam? Like, what are you finding? Is it just the transition across to the new effect engine? Because that's what I've really struggled with. That's the only thing that really stuffs me up. I can't do a simple effect.
I'm not going to claim to be super all over it, but there's just some pretty basic stuff as far as definitely the effect engine is quite difficult. At the minute, I know it's going to get better, so that's not a screw the new version sort of thing. But and there's still stuff to be implemented as far as timecode timelines and some pretty basic stuff in queue lists that is still missing. And like, obviously there's workarounds to a lot of this stuff, but it just goes back to what I was saying. Like, at the minute, if, like, for example, I had a show come out of nowhere tomorrow, I wouldn't be saying, oh yeah, let's get MA3 on it and we'll give that a crack. I would be saying,
true. So we've had one comment from Daniel, of all people. Shout out to Daniel from Chameleon / Jim's Touring, who said no one's got enough MA3 nodes in Australia anyway to do big shows yet. So it'll be a while before it takes over the current. And he's actually, to be honest, absolutely correct. Lots of companies have got a couple, but not enough for the entire festival scene to switch over tomorrow to start using MA3.
What I think is really good is that obviously you can run the 2 in the 3 system. So it's that muscle memory, which I think is really, really good. So I'd be happy to run an MA2 with a 3 console just to get my head around it, as far as sort of where everything is laid out in that aspect. So it sort of prepares me for when the actual software is somewhat stable to utilise in a bigger show later on down the track. I remember when the MA2 came out and they were basically running MA1 software on it. And it's sort of where we are in that aspect of it as well, in the sense of the effects engine. I remember when it first came out and there was basically a horrible effects engine, but it sort of got updated throughout the years. And that's sort of where we are. And that's sort of the progression, I guess, with the consoles, I find.
And it was the same with the when the 1 to 2 happened, people weren't really willing to use the 2s until the point where the 2s, the technology was far superior to the 1s in terms of keeping up with the changes of the actual shows. You couldn't get the fixture libraries. You couldn't do that effect. You couldn't use that media server and do it that way. And as the 1s obviously fell off the support, which the 2s will also, you can't repair them. You can't get the parts. They slow down and they get old. So you start to transition because, as Liam was saying, you're more comfortable on a 2 until suddenly the 2 is no longer actually reliable and it's crashing and it's failing. And suddenly you're wanting to use the 3 because it's even more risky to use the 2 for a different reason. And that was exactly what I found happened between the 1 and the 2.
Have you, I guess, any of you really, but I guess it's more a targeted question towards Brendan because he'll know who I'm talking about here. Do you still have anyone who still is speccing an MA1 for the shows that you're sort of system teching? I mean, we had a couple of holdouts that only recently transitioned across simply because we don't have any MA1s that are in working condition anymore.
Yeah, look, the last couple of holdouts that I sort of worked with and knew of have transitioned over to 2 fairly effectively now. as I said, I don't really operate anymore. If you asked me if I wanted a 1 or a 2, like depending on the complexity of the show, I'd probably have better muscle memory on a 1, but I'm well aware the 2 is more stable and more powerful. So it's hard to say. There's not many ones that I know of left around that are in good condition and are reliable. Certainly, you put them in high heat or you travel them for a fair bit, probably not going to work at the other end. So I can't think that there'd be anyone in a hurry to want to run a 1 over a 2 anymore.
Yeah, okay. That's a fair enough assumption. Look, I think hopefully we'll see it in the US festivals before we see it in our local market. We'll see the demand for the 3s go up suddenly. I reckon coming out of this, we'll have a couple of people that will want to use the 3, but I think when it comes to it, when you've got the big gig and you're confirmed for, a major event, all of us are going to run back to using MA2. Like, even on the shows that I've been running, despite owning MA3, I'm always booting it up in MA2 mode. And while I could take the patch across, you just simply don't, because it's easy. And the 3 also, for me, has introduced a bunch of new sort of networking issues. And I'm never sure whether it's the network or whether it's the hardware. I guess it's going to take us a couple of years before, even from a systems tech level, we're comfortable with using this new bit of hardware and with enough confidence to know, actually, no, that's a switch crapping itself, not the desk suddenly just dropping packets.
I think the other thing is a lot of people who are still like mid to a cycle, I don't know how you feel, Alex, but I'm not particularly psyched about, bringing my show file across into MA3 and like trying to make everything work from there when I can be still working on my show file how I would usually work on it in MA2. Like, it's not like there's a shortage.
Well, there are still tours out there that have been running 2.9 because that's what they started with, and there's no reason to upgrade. They're not adding fixtures, so there's no value in putting it up. Another couple of questions we've got. Question for the panel, especially targeted towards Liam. We'd love to hear you talk about utilizing generators. I don't understand that question. That was Dane Bolton. I'm not sure whether he's talking
generators.
Have you had a gig that's gone badly based on generators or something?
Yeah, Dane wasn't even at this gig. A very, very long time ago, when I was working for the company in Canberra, where I started out. We were in Tamworth doing the country music festival up there, and like opening night of the gig. And everyone always leaves this bit out when this story gets told. Like there was an issue with the generator. And anyway, despite the fact that we load tested and everything was fine during the load test, like very last band of the night, very last song, we managed to knock the generator over. And yeah, so.
Wow, that's a great story. I'm sorry. I was reading that and not processing it. I thought he was talking about effect generators. So I thought it was like a general question, but he's directly targeted you. I'm really sorry there.
That's to me.
Yeah, that's definitely for you.
Festival generators are always going to be a nightmare. I remember having a site manager at a recent festival waiting very, very aggressively, wanting us to wrap up for the night while we're waiting for the LD to wrap up for the night so we can also go to the pub. And right at the end, it's like, yep, you can turn the generator off, and he shuts down the last generator. And that's when we discovered that our lighting rig was on town power. Despite the very big LX written on the generator, the site crew that ran the power lock in is not coming off the generator. So it's good to know where your power is coming from. I've now had to institute the turning off my power supply as I turn on my power. Yep, I've got power. I'm going to go turn it off at the source now, just to be sure that is the source.
Yeah, but that's for another reason, Brendan. It's because you kept electrocuting yourself in every way singly possible.
Oh, look, 3 times, a couple of hospital trips.
Do they know you by name now? Is it to that level?
I don't touch Robin 600s anymore.
Do you have any generator stories, I guess, while we're here, Duane, before we move on?
Oh, look, I've knock on wood, it's like, I've had it pretty lucky with gensets.
Fiji?
Oh, yeah, geez, switching over. look, the thing is that when the RCD is wound up like no tomorrow on a genset, and you've got to dumb it down a little bit to comply with your lighting rig, that's the only thing that I've really come across as a severity. But I have heard of nightmare stories where, gensets are out of sync. I don't know if anyone else has come across that before. Not a cool thing. But yeah, as far as gensets go, yeah, definitely. Knock on wood that I don't have anything that happens drastically for me.
You're lucky. I've had fires. I've had the power lock submerged underwater. I've had the generator float away.
Right. So moving on from that, let me run through my couple of questions that we've got here. There's a lot of Liam Ashton love in the chat.
Right.
I don't know why. I won't read all of those, but I would say that 60% of the questions are just comments about you, Liam. So I don't know how you've got a fan club, but congratulations. It's you and Kristen Jackson.
It's literally everyone I know is in the chat tonight. So
oh dear.
Either here.
So 3 people.
Yes.
Ouch. And the rest is in this panel. Right. Gotcha. Okay. So coming out of COVID, you need more friends.
It's made this social distancing thing very easy.
Yeah, fair enough. How are you? So obviously I can see you're all currently sitting at home, hopefully enjoying alcoholic beverages. Have you brought? I know Liam's brought some hardware home because I can see it. But have you taken any work home with you? And how have you found working from home? Has it been hard to get up of a morning? Have you been trying to keep a regular routine, or have you just screwing it and just getting up when you feel like it?
I think routine's really important, actually. Getting up at a time. Like, look, don't get me wrong. There are times at the start of this COVID, I was sleeping in like no tomorrow, and mope around the house for a little bit and get my 1 hour's worth of exercise outside in the yard, as I call it. But yeah, certainly, I think
sounds like prison.
Yeah, well, that's what it was almost like. Living in a city, it's one of the things. I don't have a backyard or anything like that, so going outside would involve being out in the street, in public view, right near a cop shop. That's where I live. But I took my MA home, an MA2, and just been on that for a little bit. As far as upskilling, I try to divide my day up. There were certain times where I'd step away from my desk, but I think separation in your house from your rest areas is really important. Rather than sort of amalgamating it all into one, I think it's very destructive. And in that, I had a routine myself of getting up every morning, going through my morning process, and dedicating some time to research. I think research is really important in the tech world, of what's up and coming and how people have manipulated or even used technology. So I used to, even outside of COVID, I spend time researching a lot, calling people and go, hey, have you used this? Or can I come and play with this? That's really important. But yeah, that was my COVID sort of time of having something structured at least. Yeah,
okay. Any feedback from anyone else?
I haven't really bought any technology home to work with at the moment. I've been studying sort of a bit more of the management and leadership side of our industry, trying to upskill for the future. Watching a fair bit of the webinars and course training people have been putting out just to get some perspective. There was a pretty good one on the Free Speak the other day that I think Jans did that was pretty good. Just trying to keep on top of the technology. But I haven't really thought of bringing anything home. I don't really have access to anything specific that I really want to learn at the moment, but it's probably some software demos and things, but it's been good to have that bit of free time. It's a bit outside my area of expertise, an area of where I want expertise, I think.
It comes at a cheap and reliable price.
I'll give you a 6-pack of beer for it.
Done.
Routine's been important. I've set myself up my desk in my room a bit, trying to make it a bit more of a study zone, and separating, as Duane said, that sort of recreational and study areas so that you feel like you're actually working. But I've also been sticking a little bit to the ideas behind, if you're trying to study and your brain's not paying attention and switching off, stopping, taking a break and doing something recreational, because you're not actually going to learn anything if you try to force it. Like most of us, everyone in this webcast, certainly, we've worked pretty damn hard a lot of the years of our lives. Certainly Alex and Duane, we've been on some very, very hard jobs and some very long hours. I'm kind of enjoying having a little bit more free time to it's kind of payback, forced return on leave, and I've been finding that mentally really healthy to have that time to just recover from 15 years of what the fuck was that?
Yeah, fair enough. Lots of love for you still, Liam. Daniel has asked, how important when you're setting up a show is the lock screen? So during what part of the process do you set your Jim's Touring lock screen up on your desk? Is it the first thing, like before the truss bolts even come out, or like
he's not there when the truss is being bolted together?
Yeah. I need to buy some Jim's Touring swag.
Yeah, I think it's pretty important.
We do have actually one serious question, which is, what tools do you consider? It says of the three guys, so clearly I don't get to answer this question. What are some key tools or things that you couldn't do your job without? Not during COVID times, just in general. Do you all need a shifter? Is it a Leatherman for you? Is it a DMX tester? What's in your go kit?
I honestly don't think I carry my Podger and Leatherman. They're in my drawers case or my tool bag, but I hardly ever get them out anymore. I've reached the point where I'm usually more involved in what's going on with the racks and the cables, or running the crew more often than not. I've been known to turn around and go, who's got a Leatherman? And everyone goes, why haven't you got one? It's like, well, that's what you guys are here for. DMX test is an important one. I've gone through a few different types, but that's one of the main things is being able to actually check you're getting signal, that you can't really do it without. And the same with things like ArtNet tools. You're trying to check your network settings, plugging a laptop in and running your laptop just to check all your settings is probably the most useful thing I have these days. On the bottle opener.
The bottle opener, yeah, because I did have a clarification. Apparently, other than tools, what is the most important thing to take on tour?
Oh,
bottle
opener.
I always try and take something kind of homely with me. So I had a little period of time last year where I toured a pot plant.
Okay.
Yeah, I can find a photo that I could send you. But I had a pot plant. His name was Nigel. He came across Europe with me on a tour and did a few festivals, and it was nice to have the plant at front of house. And everyone gets a desk plant, so why do I not get my FOH plant? And
what is the final resting place of Nigel?
He's with a mate now, who threatened repeatedly to throw Nigel out of the front of house tower at Reading and Leeds last year. So
right, okay, so he's probably not with us anymore.
Yeah, I did leave a reminder on Nigel's pot to Tom. Remember, do not kill Nigel. But I've got no idea.
Oh dear, and now there's a rubber duck on top of the lava lamp. What about you, Duane? Someone says that you never leave the house without the harness. I'm not sure whether they mean a climbing harness or something else. We're not going to ask about that.
How PG is this?
Mate, we're drinking gin and tonics on stream. You can say whatever you want. If you're going to say I never leave the house without a gimp harness, then you may say that. Go ahead. Now I got a response out of all of you. Go ahead, Duane.
Look, for me, I think the most important tools I have is a Sharpie. How many times as a systems tech I walk up to racks and it's unlabeled, or just something that's unlabeled? Just the most simplest tool that you could ever have is a Sharpie.
Apparently, Duane's hammock is something that also you never leave the house without.
Oh, absolutely. That travels with me all the time, thanks to Jim's Touring also. It certainly is in my drawers case, and it's so small that it can even fit in my small Pelican.
The fan's a good one.
Yeah, fan is a really good one.
And the sandwich toaster.
The question has been asked to you, Brendan. Do you include the lava lamp in your power calculations when you do power calcs?
I have actually.
Oh dear, that's sad.
I will admit that depending on the length of a gig, if it's a long-term corporate gig, a week or two, I generally have actually factored in my my fan, my lava lamp. I was challenged at one point for a water feature, which I managed to actually pull off a water feature, including duck, at a gig at the plenary. So yeah, I did actually have that on my power calculation.
Wow. Okay.
And the fridges, you got your bar fridge too. Yep. Particularly on a festival, you got to have a circuit for your bar fridge, your fan.
A comment from someone says, I went through a pack of Sharpies lending them to Duane as 2IC on a gig last year. So clearly the Sharpies you're carrying are not your own, Duane.
Well, look, if they were smart, they'd hand me the Sharpie without the cap.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. Another question has been coming out of post-corona. Do you feel that, especially for freelancers, the cost that you're charging will be reduced due to the fact that, you know, people will all be trying to get the same gig? Do you have a fear that you'll have to sort of compromise your day rates?
There is a lot of concern of that. I think not just in our industry, but particularly there's a lot of concern that other industries will face two things. Either staff returning are going to be offered lower salaries, and the classic thing that I think we've seen a lot in the world of people being laid off to be rehired on lower and worse contracts for them that benefit the employer. It's probably a bit too early to tell how that's going to work. There's probably going to be companies that will try to take bottom dollar, which forces everyone down. It really doesn't help anyone. The same with staff and crew. If you take bottom dollar that's well below what you're worth, you hurt everyone. But it is a very real possibility that is probably going to be something we're going to face, is that if we want the work, we'll have to either take it for less or be willing to sacrifice and not have as much work. So it's going to be a really fine line and a hard balance, but I think it'll be a concern, yes.
Any comments?
I was having a conversation about this yesterday, and it's a really hard question, isn't it? Like, because like Brendan said, you know, there is going to be a lot of undercutting from both people who, you know, for lack of a better way to put it, just don't know any better, and from people who legitimately really need the work. So it's really hard to complain about that, but at the same time, like, I think those of us who can afford to not do it, like, will, you know, your regular clients are going to come back. You know, the industry is always going to be based on, you know, those relationships you've built and the work that you've done previously, and like all those times that you've proven yourself to the people you work with. Like, it's, you know, the money might not be there initially, but it's always gonna come back around. And so I think, like, with regular clients, like, I'm sort of prepared to take a bit of a hit when we start back, and like, I've already started having these conversations. But I think big picture, it'd be great if everyone could just sort of insist on getting their rates, but yeah, it'll be a bit hard to insist on that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, look, I tend to agree with the comments that has been provided. I think it'll come down to supply and demand. We'll go through a period where everything is a really low price, and, you know, it's just getting the gig and then getting the gear out the door. But at some point, you know, the supply and demand thing will have to dictate the prices will start to shift slowly up as demand for events, you know, increases. Another question that we've had, DMX as system text, how long do you see your main core infrastructure running off DMX? Do you see, you know, running SACN or other protocols to your fixtures in the horizon? Is it something that you've ever done on shows?
I've toyed around with that in the warehouse, but the technology's getting there, but it's not really there. It's not really stable. I've seen a lot of lag, a lot of delay. The benefits aren't really there either. Yes, you might have some greater control, but it's really rare that you need it on most gigs, unless you're doing something out of the ordinary or something where the information is really vague. You really don't need even RDM. The time it takes to access and modify and work with RDM, sometimes it's quicker to just go to the light. Obviously, there are times you can't get to the light, but DMX is stable. It works. I don't see any reason to move away from it until there's more of a benefit than what's currently offered.
I think we're already seeing, and this is a sweeping generalization, so it's not for every show out there, but like I think we're already seeing more than enough stuff that we're justified moving to networked rigs. Like I did a show last year with 200 Magic panels on it, and we did all of that on ACN, I think, and yeah, like running all of that as copper would have been an absolute nightmare. It would have been nodes for days trying to make this thing work. Like,
There's
I think
definitely applications like that for it, yes.
Yeah, and like in that application, like it worked fantastically. Like we had no issues with lag and stuff. I think it's just a matter of people being prepared to have to, people being prepared to jump into the networking end of things. And
so did you use nodes on truss lines for that?
Nope, the Magic panel, we went Ethernet into the panels, into the Magic panels. Magic panels. Yeah, that's what they're called.
Do they loop Ethernet in and out? Because that's always been the problem. Obviously with DMX, it's kind of passive. It's just looped through on a lot of fixtures. So if the first fixture in your chain dies, your DMX continues. We're starting to see that across some of the Martin fixtures, but that's, I guess, the biggest thing that's going to stop a lot of people from using network-based protocols.
Yeah,
the moment your first light dies, you lose the rest.
We were looped through, and then we had a redundant loop. So we started from a switch on the truss, went through all the lights on that truss, and then back into the switch.
Yeah, okay. So are you using a managed switch to do that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We're on Linux for that.
Yeah, okay. But see, that's an incredibly technical level of understanding required to do stuff like that. We're not talking about just simply replacing DMX cables. You're now talking about, complex switch configuration.
I am, but like, at the point where we're talking about, these hundreds of lights that each take a universe, like, I think when we're at that, DMX is really showing its limitations, and you need to have people in who can deal with that. And it's why I keep telling people, like, when I'm asked if there's some advice I can give, it's learn the networking end of things. Like, that people that know that stuff are only going to become more and more valuable. So
it is still seem to be the biggest failing of a lot of the up and coming and the younger guys coming in to try to be system techs, is that they might understand DMX and consoles and they're a whiz on the console, but when it comes to the networks, fiber systems, checking speed to sort of figure out where your issues are, they just really don't understand it. Even if they're IT savvy, they just don't understand how they work together. And also I'm finding this with designs, like what you were saying, having a switch in the air is, the switch in the air is a massive point of failure that you need to have access to. And, people aren't providing that access in the designs of their rigs. There's no truss ladders. There's no way to get to it. You can't bring the truss in, which is a whole nother problem that is added. As you said, sometimes you don't have a choice but to do that. I've done a few where we've had to put nodes, NPUs, all sorts of things, dream picks with limitations on cables, putting controllers in the air. But when they start to fail, you're in a really, really precarious spot with not being able to get to it. And a lot of the time, the people that you've told all along, this will be a problem if it fails, when it fails are the ones yelling at you to fix it. And you're going, well, I told you, we can't fix it at this point now. So it's important from the design perspective too, that people need to understand the limitations and the access requirements. If you want to have nodes in the air, great, but I need to be able to climb to every one of those trusses in a heartbeat for it to work. So hopefully moving forward, we can see a bit more of that.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Brendan, but like anything that big that I'm doing, if I'm flying switches and things like that, everything has a redundancy. Like I want to be like I want it to be bulletproof. I don't want to be having to get in the air during a show, like, because I'm never going to do that.
Yeah.
But
Depends
Hopefully.
on the gear. If it's a Switch, definitely. But if someone's been smart enough to put an NPU or a Dreampix in the air, how do you redundancy a Dreampix driver? You can't link them together. So there's some things that you just can't. There's always a point of failure you can't redundancy, unfortunately.
yeah, well, for me, this is the argument behind moving. Like, this is one of the arguments behind moving away from DMX and wanting to have everything as some kind of IP protocol, because then you can have two switches on a truss that are redundant and that are looped and that are trunked between each other and trunked between ground, and then you can run that redundant loop on the truss. So, no, it's
I just like to make it easy. I won't lie. Let's be honest, as systems guys, I'd like to make it pretty easy and understandable, but more the case if somebody else was walking into the situation, they could pick it up quick.
What's the saying? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, it's that handover. I was recently on a show where basically guys were flying in and out all the time, and they'd never seen the rig, but there was that language at the end of the day that we all spoke, and so it was really easy to just hand over, whether it be the protocols that we use. They could pick it up really, really easy, and that's one of the things that I find as well. But look, touring rigs is slightly different because you've got your crews, but when you're managing sort of a system where people are coming and going all the time, that handover needs to be really important, I find.
So paperwork is becoming more and more part of your job, because I guess it's a lot harder with network level stuff, especially in Liam's example. It's not as simple as, well, how is this connected, Duane? It's connected to, splitter 3.
Yep.
If I have to support one of Liam's shows, it's like, okay, so what switches are you using? Do I know them? What ports is he trunking? And the idea of trunking is essentially tying or bonding connections together to provide sort of a redundancy or a faster thing. It's also called a lag, a link aggregation. But it's another level of complexity. So do you see paperwork and stuff like that becoming more of your job?
A Bible of some sort, is more information is good information of some sort for everybody, whether it be myself, Brendan, or Liam, or even Alex. Like if you walked into it, you could read it and go, oh, okay, well, that's how they did that. Why did they do that? Yeah. Sometimes you question it, but as long as there's something there for you. One of the things I find from LDs when, being a systems guy is how much detail that goes into it. As far as you can tell when an LD has been a systems guy previously, because they've actually, thought about, okay, I have 6 fixtures, there's, I've got 8 cases, they go in the truck, and I've got 6 fixtures in the air, and there's 2 spares. It's just things like that. I find it really, really handy. But on that note as well, the detail on the paperwork I think is really crucial. Enough for me to pick up or somebody else to pick up, and there's that generic information across the board amongst us systems guys that we can understand straight away. Like slight things and characteristics of an LD are inputted in a lighting plot, but at the end of the day, as long as the information is readable and understandable, I find it's really, really handy. Rather than sitting there on site and with the plan going, oh, what have they done there? What does that mean? There's that sort of unique international language of LDs I find sometimes is really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think like bare minimum, regardless of what the gig is, if you've got a network on it, you need to have an Excel sheet with every item on your network, every managed switch, console, whatever, node, and just a list of IPs. And if you've got time to draw, I quite like to draw a map and have like signal paths drawn out over the stage so that you can sort of explain to someone really, really easily where everything is, where everything's going, and you can eliminate so many headaches that way, especially if you're on a festival or something and people are bringing in media servers and people are bringing in their own consoles, and there's always
Catalyst.
Yeah. There's always someone who rocks in like 20 minutes before their set and goes to plug their media server or whatever into the ArtNet VLAN or whatever, and it's like, why won't it work? Why won't it work? It's like, well, let's go back to the paperwork and let's sort it out.
It's really handy on festivals too, the IP tracking of all the devices, so that you can monitor things. You could be standing there trying to figure out what the switch at front of house is doing, and you don't know what the IP address is. Good luck finding it. So the paperwork's becoming super important. I had one festival recently where the switches were all clearly marked, every output of what they were, but just because it said what the output was didn't tell me where it was supposed to go. Particularly complicated because we were running multiple console types, all with backups, all with their own node systems for different headlining and different artists, and then festival rigs. And it got very, very complicated. We got up to 9 VLANs through the switch system. And then in the festival following that, we stripped it right back and kept it a little bit simpler. And we actually produced a plan of, just because the VLAN was labeled doesn't explain what it's for and where it's supposed to go. And that made a huge difference.
A couple of questions. First one, it's a group question. Do you have a template or a master file that you use for your paperwork? And the question that we can sort of tag onto that one is the big question of, as a systems tech, should you know Vectorworks?
I don't think you need to know Vectorworks. I think it's incredibly helpful if you do. Like, the amount of times I've just been able to email an LD and be like, just send me a Vectorworks file so I can work off that and like get all of their, even if their information isn't displayed clearly, like I can pull all the information from it and sort of work it into what I need. And I guess the other end of that question, like I have Excel templates that I use to do the vast majority of my paperwork. Very rarely do I have to knock something up from scratch, but most of mine is in Excel.
Yeah, okay. And they're reasonably good. I've seen your paperwork.
I'm the same. I've got a number of templates for different kinds of things. Full-time companies I've worked with have got some really good templates for their systems equipment. So it's really useful. Knowing Vectorworks, I think, depends on what kind of work you want to do. Again, in my recent full-time employment, knowing Vectorworks was crucial. It was a massive part of the job. Freelancing, more what Liam said, it's useful for getting plans from LDs and working with them. And Duane, probably some of the project managing you've done, Vectorworks and CAD probably was really useful. So it really depends. If you want to be a systems tech more in the on-site, working with the racks and the gear and the control gear, it's less useful. But if you're going to get involved in the planning and the production control side of things, then that's a very useful skill that you probably will find you will need to have a good understanding of, at least. Any
input, Duane?
No, I totally agree. It's if you, like Brendan was saying, if you want to play with the racks and put it all together, it's you can even use Excel for that. But if you really are, planning it from before, it's even getting to the prep stage, certainly Vectorworks and Excel. As a systems guy, I've got my own templates in place for power calculations and addressing things here and there. And you can certainly do that in Vectorworks, but, knowing at least a basic, I think, like when I first started with Vectorworks, I had no idea how to use it. And there's all those online tutorials, but at least I had a basic knowledge of it. I think it is certainly helpful for you moving on into the future. And it all depends on sort of the organization you work for, like whether or not you work full-time with a company that uses Vectorworks or, any other bits of software, or as a freelancer myself, I've sort of dabbled in all bits of software, to be honest, just to keep up to date.
We've got a question from Nathan, which is Nathan Aveling, which is a rather interesting one. I find there's a lot of ambiguity around whose job it is to bring all this information together, such as patch lists and all this kind of information. Is it the LD, the systems tech, or the production manager's job, in your opinion, to bring all this information together?
That's a loaded question.
It's definitely a loaded question because I feel like the design is the LD's responsibility, but they hold a little bit of responsibility in the way that the rig goes together in terms of depending on how complex the rig is, I don't think they should just discard the way it's going to patch and leave that up to a systems tech. But the actual core networking, I think, is down to a systems tech. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Dynamics. If you're talking an LD that's working for one company or in a festival, you're generally dealing with multiple LDs. But then also, I've done a lot of work recently where there's a creative company doing the lighting designs between the production company and the LD. So there's a whole nother level there that can really complicate who is responsible. There definitely needs to be a core responsibility. If you have too many people working on it, you end up with different plans. I've seen this a lot at recent festivals with the stage designs. Not so much the lighting designs, I'm talking the actual stage builds. Several festivals I've been to, the stage dimensions, the truss dimensions don't match. We rocked up to one that was 5 meters shorter than the plan and 2 meters narrower. So we measured everything out with a tape measure and went, hang on, this is supposed to be 16 meters wide. And when we grabbed this stage builders, they were like, what are you talking about? Well, here's the plan. It says 16 meters. Let's count your back truss. It's 14. So it's important that there's someone in charge, but who is very complicated.
I think without a doubt, as far as the systems network end of things is concerned, it's 100% the system tech's responsibility. However, I think it's really important to be having those conversations early. And I know it's not always possible, but I think it's really important to be having the conversations early with whoever the touring operator or the LD on it is. Like, I know, at least for me, I'm always that guy who insists on knowing exactly how everything is run. Because when something goes wrong, like, I want to know where to start looking, or to be able to say, like, let's look in this direction. So as an LD, I get, or as a programmer, operator, whatever you want to call it, I always get quite involved in those conversations about networks and how I want things to look and what I want available to me. But at the end of the day, it's very much whoever your system tech is, or if you're on a gig big enough to justify having a network tech, like lucky you, yeah, you've got someone there that is the go-to guy on that.
You're right. It's good to be involved early. Sorry, Duane, I cut you off.
No. That's exactly what I was going to say. Was it is certainly good to be involved a lot earlier to understand. Basically, if, like I was saying before, handing over information to somebody else, if you're all on that same level of, like Liam, for instance, was saying that he likes to know how things meticulously work, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, because in the event that something does go wrong, you can jump straight in and you can figure out alternatives on the fly. And that's sort of the main thing with our industry, is that, look, let's be honest, sometimes we wing it, but at the same time, as long as we've got that base and that foundation of how things work, we can certainly work to an achievable goal.
Do you have any more comments, Brendan? I know you jumped in there.
It was just what Liam was saying about being involved earlier, and Duane as well. It's really important to be involved earlier too, because sometimes you can, if you want your network a specific way as a systems tech, because the gear you're working with, if you're involved directly with the production company, sometimes when you're working with the external LDs and creatives, they might want something a specific way, and it gives you a chance to discuss it. I had a recent experience where a discussion about why do you want something a certain way, there is a more reliable way to do that. And they explained to me why they wanted it. And the issue there was that they just didn't know. They were a bit out of touch with the systems technology, and they didn't know there was a more reliable way to do it. And if you're not involved early, sometimes people just assume or say yes to things. They don't question it. I don't know if you guys have found the same, but there's a lot of people in the industry that if an LD or a client or someone higher up in the chain as perceived says something, a lot of people just go, oh, that's just the way it is. I think you guys all know that I generally will argue back. And it's not arguing back to be difficult, although a lot of people would disagree. It's because you ideally want to put on the best thing for them. So if you can argue back about why something should be different, and then they can, you can counter argue. I say argue, but it's really a discussion. to get the best results. You know, if you don't understand where they're coming from and they don't understand where you're coming from. So getting in early and having those conversations and not being afraid to suggest alternative things or push out why are you insisting on doing it that way, it's less reliable, is really a valuable skill that not a lot of people, I think, really appreciate.
2 questions, and we'll probably cap it off soon because we're over an hour and some of you are looking very empty on your beers. Yeah, okay, so you got a bit more. That's good. I've run out of gin and tonic. So maybe I'm just calling it.
3 beers in.
Oh, Jesus. All right, so it's just me. Well then screw me. We'll continue. Question for you all. Do you have a preferred brand of network switches? Something that you're comfortable with? Something that you're happy with? Have you found anything that really gels with you? I target this towards Liam because I know we did a festival together.
Luminex, next question.
Okay.
No, I swear Black and Blue by their kit. It's rock solid. I've run it in deserts. I've run it in floods. I've run it in... Yeah, it's just pretty much bulletproof until someone decides they're going to drop it off a loading dock.
Oh, no. I knew you were going to say that. I'm innocent. It was the wind. For those unaware, I may have been involved with an entire front of house rack dropping off a very high loading dock with a Luminex, very expensive Luminex switch.
Alex.
Yeah, this is why I don't get to touch gear. So Brendan, for you, I know you guys run the SG300 Cisco switches, or at least you used to last time I interfaced with the main company you work for. Are you across those?
Yeah, look, I've spent a lot of time learning the
Why
ins and outs of the Cisco switches.
is that funny?
No, sorry. I just looked across because I got the YouTube chat here. I just saw Hanson say,
Good answer. Yeah.
Sorry, man.
The Cisco switches are pretty generic in the sense that, you know, they're not designed for our industry, whereas the Luminex switches really are. Price point wise, the Cisco switches obviously are a lot cheaper than the Luminex switches, but Luminex switches are definitely a solid product for what we do. But the Cisco switches I've found to be fairly reliable and fairly flexible. There's a lot you can do with them that you can't do with the Luminex switches, probably on the same scale, because the Cisco switches are designed for other industrial applications. But price point wise, definitely I like the Cisco switches. I've found them pretty reliable. If you're giving me the unlimited budget, I'd probably be going with Luminex all the way, though.
Well, they colour VLANs. They're a lot more cuddly. I'm kind of disappointed. I'm not going back to MA, but MA released their own switches that could only be really configured off a lighting console, and it seemed like a good idea, but I think the Luminex ones are a lot better value because they treat things like aggregating ports together to do fiber front of house runs a lot easier, VLANs, all that kind of stuff. What about you, Duane? Have you got network switch feelings?
I certainly go down the Luminex pathway. I just find that they're really solid, you know. A lot like
You drop them off a dock.
Well, it worked after that, by the way. You bend the case back and everything works on it. I couldn't believe it. The NPU, not so much.
I've only ever had 2 issues with a Luminex switch. One was because the switch was flooded and, 20 minutes with a hairdryer and it was back online, good as new. The other one was, we were in a desert and it was 45 degrees and one of the switches decided it didn't want to do PoE anymore. So, at 45 degrees in a desert, I think, they sort of get a pass on that. Like, we're kind of outside the standard operating protocols, I guess.
Yeah,
49 degrees probably wouldn't work either. That's all I've ever done. 49 degrees.
Yeah, that's nasty. You can keep your desert, mate. What is the best way to swap consoles at a festival? Network merge, network hard switch, unplugging cables like a barbarian. What's your feeling there? How do you deal with multiple consoles turning up? Is it something you've experienced? I know at least one person on this thing has had to experience it, and we disagree on this.
Has a very complicated way of dealing with it.
Yes.
Look, I've got 2 ways that I deal with it. If there's a clear headliner and their console's going to be there all day and they're not going to be walking in until their changeover, I will do an ACN merge through the headliners console so that they have direct control all day. You know, they're obviously they're the top priority. That's who you want to, like, that's the thing that you want to not be messing up at the end of the day. So, and I also find that, you know, it just helps massage a lot of egos at front of house that way as well. And yeah, anyway. The other way that I will do it is if you've got lots of people in and out all day, and especially if you're at a festival that's going to have a pre-visit front of house, so you've got wig or whatever set up, or L8, I assign people. Usually I work it on ArtNet, just because I've had a lot of hiccups using wig and ACN before. But I will assign people subnets through the ArtNet range, and I will change switches over for them. And the reason for that is that way I can do a merge in the nodes, so that if I need to take control of your emergency lighting or your workers or your house lights or whatever, we still have a house console where I can jump on and be like, oh, there's a problem, I can turn all the more face on. Or, you know, they don't have control of the smoke machines, I can run that for them from the house.
Yeah, okay.
So there is a method to the madness. It's a little hard to describe without showing you the paperwork.
Well, you can break out diagrams if you want.
Yeah.
But certainly, you know, having control, if you're at front of house, you really want that. Like Liam was saying, whether it be emergency lighting to smoke, you know, you certainly want an aspect of control all the time. You know, an LD comes in and he's smashing smoke like no tomorrow, but it's just going nowhere. You know? And you turn to him and say, hey, look, can I pull this out for you? Or what's going on? Is there an issue? Or, you know, it's just having that level of control as well, which I think is important. I remember reading an article that you wrote, Alex, a while ago about emergency lighting.
Yep.
And that was one of those things. And that goes down to that sort of topic that Liam was saying, having that control as a front of house tech, you know, while the LD comes in, guest LDs come in, you know, you certainly want that aspect. At the end of the day, someone will go back to you and go, well, how come emergency lighting wasn't kicked in? You know, so it was, you know, just having that level of responsibility, I think, is really important as well.
Being able to, I guess, push over to another desk quickly without having to load another show file is another good one. During changeovers, there's nothing worse than having to talk to an LD and go, hey, mate, welcome. Can you just quickly patch 18 RGBs to run the ladder lighting? Or, wow, we know what show I'm talking about. You know, or something like that. Having to deal with that, I think, is really nasty, and I don't think you should have to put that on other people. And at the end of their show, a lot of LDs smash their beer, leave the strobes running, and just walk off. And with Liam's method, at least you can take control and just go, nope, that's enough, and run it off the backup console or a secondary console. Do you have any feelings, Brendan? I know you mainly play in the corporate round, but you've played into touring as well.
Yeah, look, I've done a few festivals in the last sort of 18 months. I generally am more of the stage racks end of things than the front of house end. I actually prefer to have a tech console that has the entire rig with full control of absolutely everything.
And where does that live? Is that on stage with your system tech or front of house?
On stage. No, this is on stage. So normally, depends on the festival and how many consoles. The last couple I've run have been 2-3 front of house consoles. So there hasn't been a real need for a backup at front of house because there's so many other consoles available. But having the tech console on stage, which allows people to anyone can come in and do positions and plotting and some programming on side of stage with lots of floor package changeover, it gives us the ability to flash things back at house. And for emergency lighting, because I find half the time, yes, you might get someone at front of house wanting emergency lighting, but a lot of the time it tends to come on stage through the stage manager. The stage manager is usually the first one to be alerted through any situation that there's an emergency. But I just like to have that control on stage, the tech console. I also like to design my systems with the ability to actually hard switch nodes, switches, whatever I need to over and pull things on and offline as required. And that's probably more because I've been dealing with a lot of situations where there's lots of LDs or creative companies involved. And with that many people involved, even with a front of house tech, it can get a little bit difficult to ensure things are under control. And I think it's probably more because as a stage tech, when I've been running racks on stage, I've usually been the crew boss as well. And I think that's just me wanting to have the option to be able to pull things remotely at my end. I always have my laptop jacked in as well, so I can take control pretty much at any point. Definitely merging from front of house things is the best way to, you don't want to unplug anything live. You never know what might happen. But I like to have the option as a backup for when the merging fails or someone's done something they shouldn't have. And certainly I think we all know that happens a lot. Really depends on the festival, if it's lots of LDs or if it's really simple and who else is involved and who's at front of house.
Yeah, okay. That's fair enough. So you would still, in your system, when it's based off DMX, you'd still have the old sort of A-B crunch switch between your main feed and something else?
No, it's. I mean, all of the DMX is sort of racks onwards. Front of house systems are pretty much always network. But I like to have the flexibility to physically unplug and remove any switch or node or console from each other as a backup. I've definitely had situations where arguments at front of house between the various parties involved, including the systems tech at front of house, tend to lead to some problems. And sometimes the easiest way to solve those problems is to unplug the problem. But yeah, it's not the best option. It's just an option I like to have. But I think that's more because I'm usually at the rack's end. So I suppose I don't have the easy control over what's going on at front of house. So I like to have that option up my sleeve, but I prefer not to use it where possible.
So another question coming from chat. You rock up as an artist touring LD and there's a ton of decor lighting that it's not on the advance and you've got to change over 5 minutes. As operators or even system techs, how do you deal with this? Do you just sort of go, whatever, we're not going to have the decor lighting, or it's
my tech console's for?
Live life on the edge. Give it a crack.
Yeah, okay.
Decor lighting is literally the least of my concern. Even if it's on the advance, like I do, generally speaking, I'll have something I can clone across, but if I've got 20 minutes to do it, like to get my show up and running, or, I'm on a tight changeover, like I don't think you're ever going to have a promoter who is in your ear about why the decor light isn't on. And even if you might do, but even if they do, like, you're there to do your show. You're not there to do.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I am there in support of artists that I am touring with, not
festival. Yeah, you're not really
caring
caring about what the festival has and whether their sign is lit up or whatever. That should definitely be off a second console.
Coming in as the touring systems LD or the site LD for the production?
Sorry?
Just with what Liam's saying, are you saying like if you're coming in with the LD and the act, or if you're the systems tech for the actual rig from the production and festival end?
I think we're talking about coming in as a touring LD.
You're coming as a touring LD. I think we're definitely losing Duane. I think he's downloading something.
Oh, I think obviously, like, you want to make everyone look as good as you can. Like, even if it's a festival you're visiting, you want to make the festival look good. But at the end of the day, it's the last thing I care about.
Question for all of you: where do NPUs, when we're talking MA networking, where do they belong? Front of house or on stage?
Front of house, unless you got 20 of them.
Okay, fair enough. Unless you have 20 of them, right? Okay, interesting.
20 of them, you probably want them out the back.
I think they should be out the back, but a lot of people do want them at front of house, but I just don't see what you can really do with them at front of house that you need to be able to do. If you've got systems techs at front of house and at stage, what else do you need?
They are a glorified USB parameter dongle for most people. Especially in the US market and Europe, they seem to live front of house, and then they use other ways of getting data back. But I guess that's when you're not running a completely MA-centric festival and you've got to deal with other consoles such as Overlights and stuff.
Yeah, like I will go to some pretty extreme lengths to have to avoid using an NPU for outputs. So I want them in front of house because generally that's where I'm hanging out. And if I need to text something, it's heaps easier than me jumping on the radio to someone 80 meters away, or me having to march down to the stage to fix something. Like if I've got an NPU causing session collisions because there's a shitty bit of Cat 5 in the back of a rack or something, it's heaps easier for me to just be like, oh, I can fix that, and just yank cable out than have to, jump on comms to someone and try and explain what it is that I've done in this rack.
I suppose that comes back to where you are. Again, I'm usually at stage, so I'd rather the NPUs be at stage where I am. Again, I prefer not to use them for the outputs, but same thing. If I want to fix them, I want them where I am. So I guess that, if you're front of house, you want them there. And if you're at stage, you probably want them there. I like the idea of them being on stage so that if you lose front of house for any reason with your tech console on stage and your NPUs on stage, you actually haven't compromised your rig in any way other than having lost control from the front of house perspective. I've never seen it happen. I just like to have that option.
Yeah, but even with the NPUs on stage, unless you've got a console on stage as well, you're not going to be able to.
Well, as I said, I generally do have a tech console on stage so that front of house could fall off the cliff and I'd still have the rig up and running.
Well, but even if you had that console on stage, you could still have the NPUs in front of house. And if your multi-core got cut in half at some point, you would still have those parameters on.
That's right. Unless you reboot the power, you'll still have it anyway. So it's really not that big of a deal.
But it doesn't even need to be a console. You could just use it on PC laptop. You'll still have your parameters.
Plug your laptop in.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
Plug in.
Have we got you back, Duane? You disappeared.
Yeah, I'm back. Look, at the end of it, I just want to make it easy. I'm not going to lie. Whether it be a front of house or side of stage, I just want to make it easy.
I suppose it depends on whether you want me to carry the rack of NPUs up 3 flights of stairs in a tower too.
If I'm the LT, I definitely want you to do that.
Right.
But you personally, I just want to see people hefting NPUs. But maybe that's because I'm a white glove. Duane, you're terrible, dude. You're frozen on a very smiley, happy-looking face. So whatever you're downloading in the background, it is not doing you any justice. So we'll end off. We've done about an hour and 20 minutes, and with Duane's internet slowly dwindling, I think he's looking confused and technical. He's got the glasses on though. Mr. IT there. The real question is, are any of you wearing pants?
Do I have to answer?
Yes, I'm
Real
wearing
mind.
pants.
Real mind. I don't think it's cold in my house though.
Fair enough. Yeah, some people in the chat say they aren't wearing glasses. Others really like your glasses, Duane. Yeah, so
Look at my fan.
is it? Look, I guess we'll end it here. Is there any sort of end statements, any advice you want to give to those that are watching? We have a small but decently sized audience. That's also what I tell my girlfriend on a regular basis about my penis. Why did I go there? Continue.
About you every day, Alex. Why do you go anywhere you go?
Because I'm the MC and I can say whatever I want.
If we're going to end it, all I say is that look after each other during these times. It's been pretty hard in the industry itself. It's. I mean, pick up the phone, call each other. That sort of thing. It's not hard to do, guys. At the end of it, the industry is a huge impact on people. We make an impact on people's lives like no tomorrow, but we also have to take care of each other at the end of the day.
Fair enough. Any closing comments from Liam or Brendan?
Well, I think I've heard enough of all that. Pick up the phone and call, and we're all in this together. So I'll go completely the opposite way and say, fuck yous all. Every man for himself.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Just say you haven't changed much in the last couple of years that I haven't seen you leave. Do you want a job after the end of this, or is this just you? You're just gonna.
Well,
you've just become a grumpy old man.
Become a grumpy old man? No, this has been me for a very long time, Alex. I came out this way.
On a more positive
Into the
note,
world like this.
ignoring Liam.
This has gone on for 20 minutes too long. Please go ahead, Brendan, while I mute Liam.
I think it is important that I'm sick of hearing we're all in this boat together. I think we're all in the same storm. But if you all think we're on the same boat, you're a fucking idiot. I'll just say that straight out.
So what do you mean by that, Brendan, in all seriousness?
Particularly, this is probably not so much internal to our industry as it is just across the board. There are a lot of people that are losing work and doing it hard. Certainly our industry's been hit hard. Tourism's been hit hard. Our industry's not getting much recognition. I've seen a lot in the news lately about how tourism was the hardest and first hit. I don't think it was the first hit at all. I certainly think we were. I think the road out will be a lot longer for us than it will be for tourism. So whilst it's shit for them and hospitality and several other industries that have had to wind down and a lot of staff that have been lost, the airlines, yes, we're all in the same storm, but we are definitely not on the same boat. We're not in the same position. A lot of people are leaving the industry and probably won't ever come back. I definitely would like to see as many of us stick it out. What I'd like to see when we start to get the work is that we share it round and stop being so Liam central focused and fuck everybody. I'd really like to see us share the work a bit more. A lot of people in the industry don't like to train anyone. They don't like to teach them their tricks. They don't like to pass on their knowledge because they think it'll undercut them out of the work. And I think, you guys probably know I'm a bit the opposite of that. I'm always wanting to train and teach and, help people learn new things. And I'd like to see that really a lot more. I'd like to see more cooperation between all of us as freelancers and the companies. Stop fighting each other. Stop squabbling over doing it as cheap as possible and really come together as an industry because we're sure as hell not going to get the support from the government or anywhere else. So let's make our industry survive by working together instead of against each other, Liam.
And do you think that's practical? Do you think it's ever going to happen?
Look, it's difficult. I think for the next 18 months, most people are going to be lucky to be breaking even. They're certainly not going to be making profit. I was having this conversation with a business today about, I saw there was a theatre that ripped out 90% of their seating so they could meet spatial requirements. I don't remember where it was. I don't think it was in Australia. Obviously, at that sort of ticket sales, you're not making a profit. But what's your alternative? Do nothing, don't run. Hopefully with some incentives from government and business, you can survive doing that. But they're doing it to prove that the industry can survive and that they can keep going. They're doing it to do gigs rather than to turn a profit. And, while I don't want to say, obviously, we can't work without money, I'd like to see people focusing a little more on making our industry survive and a little less on pulling ahead and making a profit, not screwing everybody else by doing it as cheap as possible and stealing the work from everyone, but sharing everything around and trying to work together more. Obviously, in the long run, it'll go back to a profit-based industry, but certainly for the short term, I think that's better for the industry in general if we work together.
Yeah, it's a good idea to have. Do you have anything to add, Frozen Duane? No?
Oh, Frozen Duane here. Well, yeah, look, we went into this industry and one of the things is that teamwork and camaraderie is a huge thing. And so I'm a firm believer that, I worked in various events where, taught the youth basically to work together towards one goal. And that's what we're doing right now. We're all working towards one goal. At the end of the day, we want to see an execution of a successful show, but we just need to come together and actually be on the same page.
Fantastic. Liam, have you got anything positive to say?
Not usually.
No, okay.
No.
So you're gonna stick with that. Look, Brendan touches on a really interesting point about training. Obviously, there's a huge amount of resources out there, so the advice that I would give is learn a little bit of everything. You're never going to be the next big notch-based person or defense person without putting a lot of shows underneath your belt, and your experience in other areas should prove that to you, but knowing a little bit about what the other departments are doing is going to help you, because coming out of this, we've all said the same thing. If you've got a basic understanding of networking, you're going to be a lot better than some of the older guys. But there's definitely going to be a lot of people that are going to come out and very quickly realize that they know very little in the real world. So while you have learned a lot about certain things, that's great. But we're in an industry of, you know, it's not what you know, but who you know. So you're still really going to need to rely on your network and those around you that, you know, you can trust, and bringing people in is always a risk. So network is my advice. It's quite hard, but I know a lot of companies are running sort of little Zoom not cocktail, but sort of beer and Friday night chat things. We'll obviously be doing more of these because I think they're really helpful. We've done obviously 2. Someone says don't be ageist, but old people can learn too. Never teach an old dog new tricks. Something. I should stop reading chat, but. I think Brendan's right. I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where it's all one big happy family, but we definitely can stop sort of nipping at everyone's heels, trying to undercut. But that needs to come from a company level, and I think coming out of the gate, everyone is just going to be looking to pay people's salaries, and that's going to be a really tough thing.
I think even before you get to that point, like, just basic, and I know that I don't always do this, basic don't be a dick mentality is it's basically the main thing that I think people need to remember, both on shows and through this time. So just
Fair enough.
spot on.
Better check in with people.
Don't be a dick. That's yeah, you're right. It certainly is.
Well, no one's ever told me that is the problem. So
Don't be a Liam or don't be a dick.
both.
I'll keep that in mind for the next time I see you in person. I'll tell you both repeatedly.
Oh dear, don't be a
My
lame and
side
don't be a
level.
dick. Oh. For Matt Hansen says, for the next 12 months, we'll go back to copper course to front of house. Don't forget your roots. Remember the basics. Okay? I think there's more to that than he's meaning there to be.
Simple gigs, simple solutions.
Yeah, okay. I'm guessing that's what he's... Yep. Someone says, in before 48-way audio copper passing DMX. All right, and I think we're definitely ending it there.
No audio talking, thank you. Let's move on.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to Brendan, Liam, and Duane for giving up, you know, nearly 2 hours of their Friday night to talk about lighting and talk about just everything. And, you know, thanks to ALIA for sponsoring this thing, and, well, not really sponsoring, but hosting it for us. Thanks, everyone.